And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes. We're happy you joined us. Today, in my guests, we have the Honorable Sean O'Donnell, who's the King County Superior Court Judge. He joins us today. Your Honor, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We know you're a busy guy. You're also one of the tallest judges in the state, I understand, at 6'8".
I am indeed.
Okay. Did you play basketball?
I did back in my youth.
You probably get asked that a lot. Born and raised in Seattle,
Yes.
Grew up in Bellevue,
I did.
Georgetown University Law School. Did you enjoy living on the East Coast?
Seattle University Law School.
Oh, Georgetown University
I did undergrad. I was a Hoya for my undergrad,
Okay.
a Red Hawk for law school.
Did you enjoy living on the East Coast for a while?
I did, yeah. It's a great place to be when you're young and unattached. Lots going on.
Lots to see, lots of battlefields, monuments.
Absolutely.
At what point in your career did you decide that I want to enter the law, I want to go to law school, I'm going to make this my career? What was your motivation?
So I worked on the Hill back
Capitol Hill?
in D.C.
Okay.
and got to saw the other side of the process, which is how law is made. That was a fascinating time back there, and I knew I wasn't going to be an accountant, so I sort of recognizing my skill sets. Numbers was not it. And law school seemed like a natural destination, and I'm really glad that that's the path that I took.
You went to law school at night, as I understand, and worked at Boeing during the day. What did you do for Boeing?
So I wore a couple of hats at Boeing. I was a speechwriter for some of their executives. Because of my work on the Hill before I came out to Seattle, I worked on trade issues for Boeing, so a couple times I'd go back to DC, and back then they had an annual reauthorization of something called Most Favored Nation status with China. Mm-hmm. So I helped with that because Boeing had suppliers all across the country. Sure. And work with China, being able to sell airplanes to China was a big issue for them, and so I got to participate in that.
After law school, you essentially started your career as a prosecuting attorney. What led to your decision that you wanted to work on that side of the law? You wanted to prosecute crimes.
Well, I loved being in the courtroom. I knew that I wanted to do trial work, and I was fortunate enough to get an internship with Norm Mailing when I was going to night school.
The late great Norm Mailing.
Yeah, and you know, his approach to that office really resonated with me. And you remember Norm had this saying, you know, it's not about getting convictions, it's about what's doing right. And it was an opportunity to be a voice for people who had been through really awful experiences being victims of crime. And that I embraced that work and really enjoyed that office, its philosophy towards justice, and as I said, being in the courtroom.
You've prosecuted and seen a lot of bad people in your career, but at the same time, there's that human element where there's victims that you have to speak with and that you have to see. That must just take an emotional toll at times for someone like yourself who deals with this subject matter and sees these folks on a daily basis.
I think it takes a toll on anyone who does the work, whether you're in the prosecution side or on the defense side, because you're right, some of the cases that we see at the felony level are examples of, on the one hand, the worst of what people can do to one another. On the other hand, they're also examples of, and a testament to the human spirit of recovery, of courage, and sometimes of forgiveness. In trials, as you're a trial lawyer, you know it. There's stories behind each trial.
That's right.
And there's 1,000 steps to getting to that point where you're in the courtroom that happen first. And it's real people and their experiences and their lives that are impacted. But to your question, you know, would it impact me, or do I? Can it be emotional? Well, sure, it can, because many of these stories are heartbreaking.
Do you think it makes you a better trial attorney?
Hopefully it makes me a better trial judge. And as a trial attorney, being able to, I mean, I can never put myself in someone's shoes who's been through a horrific act of violence or have been accused of an awful crime. But having handled many of these cases and working with them and hearing their stories and helping them navigate this sometimes Byzantine process, I think it's like any profession. The more experience you have there, the better you can be at it.
Judge, at some point in your career, you also worked as a U.S. attorney on the Terrorism and Violent Crimes Unit. How long were you with that unit for?
So I was a special assistant United States attorney, which meant I got to wear two hats, one as a county prosecutor and then one as a federal prosecutor. I did that for around 2 years, and the cases that we focused on there involved human trafficking or minors who were put into the world of sex trafficking. And there was nice collaboration between the offices on investigations and prosecutions of those cases.
Have you seen a change in the types of crimes that you prosecuted over the years? For instance, have you seen more cyber-related crimes than we have over the last 5 or 10 years or so?
Well, I've seen a change in the type of evidence used to prosecute crimes and defend against crimes. And you've referenced one that's sort of the world of the internet and social media and the like. People oftentimes will put things on their Facebook page which they wouldn't share with a police officer, or maybe they'll send something in a text that they wouldn't want to see displayed publicly. But that type of evidence is becoming much more prevalent. Same with other types of evidence used in these cases, like body cam video that police officers wear, dash cam video, and the like. And it really has changed approaches to how you work up these cases, whether you're the state or you're the defense. And the other major trend, I think, in probably the last 10 years is the expansion of what's called mitigation work in cases that are headed to trial but might not get to trial. They might resolve via police. So working with forensic scientists to interview defendants and doing a deeper dive into what's their history, what's their mental health status, do they have chemical dependency issues, and how do we get to this point where they're now accused of something very serious?
Kind of delving more into their background, finding out what led them to make these decisions, like you said.
That's right. And was there something in the moment that was impacting those choices, which can lead to really terrible results? Now, the flip side is, we still see the usual type of crime where people just are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So it's all in the mix.
You also serve the public on serving on the Most Dangerous Offenders Project. What is the Most Dangerous Offenders Project?
So that is something that the King County Prosecutor's Office runs, and the name reveals a little bit of it, but it was a unit that they set up, that Norm Mailing established, that prosecuted homicide cases. And what King County did, which was different than many other offices out there, is that they would assign a prosecutor to the case from the moment the police got called out to the crime scene. So when you're on that unit, at the time they called it the pager or the bat phone, and you'd have this thing with you 24/7.
Sure.
And if you were on call and a murder happened or a homicide happened in King County, you're getting sent out to that scene. So the people that work on that unit, they'll get the call, they'll go to the crime scene, they'll stay there for the hours it takes to process the crime scene, they'll help detectives prepare search warrants, but then you go to the autopsy, and you are there with the medical examiner and the case detective and learning about the case. One of the founders of that group used to say, and it might sound a little cold, but the best evidence in a homicide case is, frankly, the decedent's body. You learn so much about what happened there. And so being there and being where the murder occurred, when it comes time to tell that story and you're in trial in front of a jury, there's no substitute for that firsthand experience, having seen what the place looked like after the fact.
Been there personally, the sights, the smells, everything.
Right. I mean, it stays with you.
You also, let me ask you this, would you estimate about how many homicide cases that you think you've tried in your career? Any idea?
Tried to jury?
Yes.
Not many tried to jury, but handled throughout my time as a prosecutor, more than a few.
Resulting in guilty pleas and bad people being put away for a number of years. Speaking of bad people, you worked on a very famous case, the Gary Ridgeway murders. This was just a remarkable case, just some horrible events that happened. You were put in the position as one of the prosecuting attorneys who helped put Mr. Ridgeway away. What was your reaction when you first found out that you were going to be assigned to one of the most prolific homicide serial killers in the United States? What was your reaction?
Well, I was a relatively young lawyer at the time, and I recognized then it was the case of a lifetime. Yeah. That being involved in there was a very special responsibility and something that was a privilege to serve on that task force because of what that case meant not only to the families of dozens and dozens of girls and young women who Ridgeway murdered, but also to this community. Because if you grew up here in the Pacific Northwest in the late 70s and 80s and early 90s, a Green River killer, everybody knew about it.
Yes.
And it was a case that, and I think it's fair to say, terrorized this area for many, many years because of how many people lost their lives at this man's hands. And so then to be involved in that group that was going to try to resolve that case really was an honor.
I'll bet it was. And all these young women that unfortunately were murdered by this man. And then there was a period of time where apparently there were no murders. He went a while without committing any crimes and then started up again. Or
that's a misconception.
Okay. Clarify that
He
for
may
me.
have slowed down slightly, but he still was killing. Yeah. And thankfully, the detective, his name was Tom Jensen, who was really assigned to that case when the task force wound down in the late 80s, he never gave up. Every day he came in and was looking at loose ends, following up on missing person reports. And it was Detective Jensen who decided in 2001 that they had a cheek swab of Gary Ridgeway from the mid-'80s, because someone back then had the foresight to take a cheek swab when DNA really wasn't a thing.
That's right.
Well, it was a thing, but it wasn't an avenue of investigation. But Detective Jensen submitted it to the crime lab, and they got a hit between Ridgeway and the victims that he had left in the Green River. And that was an astonishing moment. I wasn't on the case at that point, but I remember seeing it on the headlines, breaking news, that he had been arrested the Green River killer had been arrested for those murders.
And we're talking to former Sheriff John Urquhart, and he was telling me when he first heard over the radio, they knew Ridgeway was the person, they had him in custody, and he said he'll never forget those words over the radio, suspect in custody, and they knew they had the most prolific killer in custody. What would you say has been the most rewarding part of your job so far as a Superior Court judge? What do you come away with every day saying, I am happy I am in this position?
This is a job where we're tasked with making really important decisions that can forever change a person's life. And I feel that it is a privilege that I've been given this opportunity to be in that spot and to try to exercise my best judgment in the cases that come before me. I look at my time on the family law calendar where judges make decisions that will impact how and when parents can spend time with their kids when there's been a divorce or they're asking for a parenting plan. And that to me was exceptionally rewarding. It was hard, really tough work, but it was rewarding. Another aspect of the job that I've really enjoyed is working with policymakers on some bigger ticket items. I've been deeply involved in looking at what we're calling pretrial reform, so that time between when someone is accused of a crime but not convicted and the time their case resolves, whether it's through trial or a guilty plea or dismissed. We have a lot of room for improvement in Washington State in that area.
In these pretrial services.
In pretrial services, on how we collect data about what this population looks like, how we look at ways to reduce recidivism and not showing up to court, and how we can safely release more people into the community while they are not guilty yet, but accused, and actually potentially save taxpayers a significant amount of money. Believe it or not, it is very expensive to keep someone in custody. You know, in the King County Jail, it's about $190 a day per inmate. And you figure we have 2,000 inmates, or 2,000 folks that are at any given point held in the King County Jail on a given day. You know, that's over $380,000 a day.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. And if you can safely have services so that it will help people who might be addicted or mentally ill or both show up to court, take their meds, stay off of drugs, not commit new crimes, and you can do that investment in a way that's going to do right by them, but also do right by safely reducing that number in jail. That, to me, there's a lot of resonance there.
You might not see those people again once their case is resolved if that intervention is done properly.
You know, you might not, but it's always a tough balance, right? Because you look in our community and property crimes are real. People are really impacted by those, and you know, they're not crimes of violence, but you have your car stolen, that can blow up your whole day. It can blow up your whole month, and it can affect anything from where you take your kids or how you get to work or all of that. So it's a real issue. It's particularly a real issue here in King County in Seattle. And
the Honorable Sean O'Donnell, thank you for being with us
Thanks for
today,
having
Judge.
me.
We appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope you'll join us again for another edition of 15 Minutes. We'll see you soon.